Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, and your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.com. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. From what people think they know but don't about COVID to what people think they know but don't about racism. What happens when somebody goes off script? Because the media's job is fear-mongering and gaslighting. You know, the politico media complex. So what happens when, say, Breonna Taylor's mom trashes the Louisville chapter of Black Lives Matter? Breonna Taylor, one of the cause celebs for the race racketeers. I have never personally dealt with BLM Louisville and personally have found them to be fraud, said Tamika Palmer, the mom of Breonna Taylor. What happened when she posted that on Facebook? Facebook, playing its role as sort of the mothership for the press corps and the left, took her Facebook post down. You can't criticizing Black Lives Matter as racist, even if you're Breonna Taylor's mom.
Okay. Black. Okay.
All right. So you wonder why people think racism and race relations are racism is so much more of a problem and race relations are so much more frayed than they actually are if you stopped to think about, as we've talked about this before, if you stopped to think about how you interact with people of different races and all sorts of different walks of life on a daily basis. I mean, how many times have you ever had an incident that was racially driven or faith driven? You know, where you feel like there's a race war out there. There's no race war.
Well, I wonder how much BLM made off of Breonna Taylor's death.
There's no race war, and there's no war between Christians and Muslims. I mean, not in this country. Faithful Christians and faithful Muslims. But the fear-mongering and the gaslighting is unrelenting. And so you wind up with a population that is, at least a preponderance of, is woefully uninformed and incapable of behaving like adults. And that's when the government steps in. It's a sad state of affairs, and I'm sorry, but a few letters from a few parents at prep schools isn't going to reverse what's happening everywhere. But at least you can document it and provide information to people, whether they choose to consume it, understand it, and apply it. Well, that's another matter. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined again by our friend Eric Kauffman, who's a poli-sci professor at Birkbeck College, University of London. Professor Kauffman, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good to be here, Dan, as always.
Yeah, thank you. Good to have you. And so your new study, the social construction of racism in the United States, is some interesting questions you put to people to try to provide some evidence to what I am describing as happening, but that's just a contention until you put some social science data behind it.
Yeah, I mean, basically this is just about showing or testing the idea that perception actually matters more than reality for people's views on racism. And that's not just, I mean, this is definitely the case for views on racism as a national problem, where it's overwhelmingly perception-based and very divorced from reality, but also personal experiences of racism are heavily colored by ideology and exposure to social media and the media, and that's sort of one of the things that this study really shows.
Well, and give us an example of the questions you posed and the information you introduced and how it impacted people. I mean, I'm thinking from reading your piece that, when you introduce something incendiary from like Ta-Nehisi Coates, that very much changes people's attitudes about the underlying question.
Yeah, so I was interested to know, in terms of critical race theory inspired work such as that of Ta-Nehisi Coates, what's the effect on black people? Because really this is supposedly about helping black people. But yet we know that when people are encouraged to think that the world is a dangerous place and is stacked against them, that may actually disempower them. And this is exactly what we found. What we had essentially is half people read some Ta-Nehisi Coates and the other half not read it. These are a sample of African Americans. And the ones who read the Ta-Nehisi Coates passage, which is all full of things such as, the police are out to get you and America's sort of deeply racist country and all of that. We, when asked after reading that passage, do you think you can make your life plans work out? The ones who didn't read the Ta-Nehisi Coates, about 83%, said they could make their life plans work out, whereas the ones after reading the Ta-Nehisi Coates, only 68%. So we saw a 15-point drop in people's self-belief and empowerment of African Americans after reading that, which sort of gives you an indication of what the damage that this sort of narrative is doing, is saturating the media, is actually having on African Americans.
Well, let me ask you this question. Are young black men more likely to be shot to death by police or die in a car accident?
Right. Well, and of course the answer is it's about a 10 times greater likelihood of dying in a car accident. And so this was just a way of saying, okay, we have something that's an undisputed fact. This is not a matter of opinion. Is there more or less racism out there? You could say that's in the eye of the beholder. But when we're talking about car accidents and number of young people shot by police, these are hard numbers that we have. And what's remarkable is you had essentially 80% of black Biden voters saying that it's more likely for a young black man to be shot by police. You had 7 out of 10 white liberals who say that all Republicans are racist, and it's about 65% of white liberals who say that. Amongst the white liberals who say white Republicans are racist, about 7 in 10 say black men are more likely to be shot by police than to die in a car accident. So just having those ideological priors simply makes you unable to answer the question correctly. And by the way, there was an option that said, well, I don't know, it's neither this nor that. They didn't select that. 7 or 8 out of 10 were selecting the shot by police option. So it's just to show that people's perceptions, even of hard facts, are completely skewed by ideology and media exposure.
Here's something else, too. It's a good question that you pose because it seems to me if minorities don't understand how infantilizing are these white champagne socialists, then you're really never going to turn the tide. If they think that those champagne socialists, these just ghastly people, are their friends, their protectors, then I think you just have a problem that's intractable. So the political correctness question, demeaning or necessary, and how did that shake out?
Well, yeah, so I wanted to find out, in a choice between do you see political correctness as demeaning or as necessary to protect African Americans, and what you saw was that African Americans, slight majority said it was demeaning rather than necessary. If you take white liberals, it was something on the order of 62 to 38, so 62% saying it was necessary to protect African Americans. So you had a significantly more, if you like, left-wing response amongst white liberals than even amongst black liberals who were pretty close to 50-50. So it's really white liberals standing out a lot on that question. And also, by the way, on a subsequent question, really, which was asking about, in terms of a future state of affairs, would you rather have a society that racism is punished so heavily that it doesn't ever happen versus a society where African Americans have grown confident, so confident that they simply aren't really affected by these by racist insults. And it was interesting to see how much more the African American respondents preferred the scenario in which they were less confident and not affected, compared to the white liberals. The white liberals wanted to have a sort of zero-tolerance approach where there was extremely strong punishment, the punitive approach, by about a 71-29 margin, whereas amongst the African-American respondents it was essentially majority for the more resilient response. I think that's very revealing of the different mentalities that obtain between the African-American respondents and the white liberal respondents.
No, it is, but I mean, it's all these white liberals. They're Leonard Bernstein in Radical Chic. That's who they are, and the Black Panthers get the joke at his penthouse, but they're going to take advantage of the opportunity that him feeding them and raising money for them provides. I get that, but I guess the question becomes, if you could interpolate your study a little bit. So what's if that's true? I'd rather be left alone, confident. I'd rather be self-sufficient. I'd rather not have to, people walking around on eggshells around me, treat me as another human being. If that's the perspective of many more blacks than it is these white liberals, what is the disconnect between blacks and white Republicans? Is it just that the belief that has been implanted that all white Republicans or white conservatives are racist, that just subordinates everything else? That's the hurdle that must be cleared?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there is this historic association between being black and being a Democrat and associating the Republicans perhaps with racism. Again, that's the media has played a big role in trying to sort of construct and strengthen that association, of course. But I think that, of course we do see there is some data that shows that as African Americans are moving out of their traditional neighborhoods, they're more likely to vote Republican. So that has been happening several elections in a row, but still at a very low level. I think this is a sort of function of this media climate where the link between Republicans and racism is constantly being reinforced, and that's still probably believed by a relatively high share of African Americans.
Yes, Professor Eric Kauffman at Birkbeck College, University of London. I'll post his study that we were referencing. Professor Kauffman, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Nissan set to slash production because of a chip shortage. America needs more home builders, and Facebook debates the future of President Trump's account. Those stories next.
The following are real-life stories from Trinity Debt Management.
My story begins with debt, a lot of debt.
I used my credit cards as a source of income.
It was not a good situation.
I couldn't pay my bills.
The interest on the cards was really high.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-990-6976.
I initially was scared to call, and immediately I felt relieved.
They contacted all of our creditors, and they put us on a plan for success.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into